could lead to no other end. That's. I'm also, although I'm extremely fortunate in life, in health, in access, in everything that life has given me, I am not a very optimistic person about the nature of the life.
It seems to me that your protagonists are romantics.
I think that's also true. I think that yes, even the most cynical are disappointed romantics, but they are. It's a little bit the influence, I think, of German literature upon me. They are looking for what the Germans call the blue flower. And there is something, even in seemingly the most cynical of the books, if you take The Spy Who Came In From the Cold, actually it's quite romantic, that the lovers die together, that the man goes back to her after she's been killed and wants to die beside her. They're reunited in love. Actually a thesis that reappears in The Constant Gardener. Yes, I have, of course, in many ways, a romantic heart.
Thank you for this wonderful gift.
How very generous of me.
No,
So our life is not better after the end of the Cold War, isn't it?
It isn't better. I don't believe so, no. No.
Perhaps it's worse, though.
I certainly...
There's not vigilance.
No, but equally we do have to remember, and I suspect you are old enough to remember, that through many years of the Cold War, we felt lucky to wake up in the morning, that the balance of terror was absolutely terrifying. And I mean, I was a young diplomat in Bonn at the time of the Cuba crisis and at the time when the Berlin Wall went up. And I had seen some of the contingency plans that were operating. If they do this, we will do that. If we do this, they will do that. The dangers of extinction were real. And at the Cuba crisis, saved by a spy, Penkovsky, probably the war was actually prevented by a spy in that case.
Yes.
Oleg Penkovsky was the Russian GRU colonel who gave us, in advance of Khrushchev's advance on Cuba, gave us the complete breakdown of Soviet rocketry and Soviet weapon power. And probably without that information, Kennedy could never have played the poker game that he did play. You turn back. You turn your ships back and take them away. Do you remember the Russian ships went round? Yes, we went through bad times then, too. We lived with terror. When you declare a war on terror, you create a neurosis among people that ceases to be reasonable. You enslave them, actually, to your fears. I don't believe that we are as much at threat as we are daily told. The horror to me, at my time of life, is to see the movie coming round again. I thought there was going to be a moment in 1998, 99, 90. There was indeed a moment where we could recreate the world. We were the absolute, we the West, United States, was the one superpower. There was no Marshall Plan. There was no Peace Corps from the United States to the Soviet Union, ex-Soviet Union. There was absolutely no grace or creativity in the way we addressed the world at that moment. For the blink of a star, we could have remade it, and there was nobody there. We went instead into a kind of economic isolation. We congratulated ourselves. We made ourselves too rich. We produced an unsustainable economy, which we must now reduce again, or the world will go to the devil. And under Thatcher, whose influence upon my country I detest, we dignified greed and materialism, a dignification much extended by Blair, to the point where we've made ourselves deeply unhappy. The rich are too rich, the poor are too poor. Again, we have an unsustainable economy, expectations of life, of freedom, too much travel, too much pollution. We don't know how to control ourselves. And these are not the gloomy perceptions of an old man. They are the objective perceptions that anyone can make. My children are making it. So part of my personal disenchantment derives from the feeling that we missed the bus at the end of the Cold War. And part of my anger with the wrong elements of the United States is that America could not think itself out of a posture of belligerence. We in old Europe know about war, and we don't want any more war. We hate war. The United States, alas, has still to interpret politics in military terms. And that's a catastrophe. And I don't believe that we should have ever enslaved ourselves to United States foreign policy to the extent that we have done. And as I see Merkel now advancing cautiously towards the Americans, and the appalling pressure the United States is exerting upon European liberalism, forcing us to accept these black prisons, shipping prisoners for torture to places that we wouldn't entertain in the woodshed. I am deeply ashamed of all that. I was deeply embarrassed that my Prime Minister became the minstrel, the herald for this inarticulate and, to my mind, completely mistaken attack on Iraq. I was ashamed that we offered ourselves in a sense, to give the respectable voice to an action I considered to be anything but respectable. It is, of course, it is a very curious thing that these days it's very hard to buy or to read uninfluenced, unbought opinion, whether in the press, in politics, on radio and television. Increasingly, people are afraid of offending against the corporate or the collective voice. I've always regarded it not just as a privilege but as a duty to speak against authority. I want to speak truth to power. And I recognize that because I have a small voice and it is not dependent upon anybody's approval, I also have that duty to speak.
Excuse me?
Yes?
Excuse me?
Yes,
I've just got one question. I just wondered, whose map is Britain using when it completely ignores the United Nations and decides to invade Iraq? Or do you think it's more diplomatic to bend the will of a superpower and politely take part in Vietnam, the sequel? Let's face it, we've taken 60 years to build up this international organization called the United Nations, which is meant to avoid wars, and now we just blow it up because our car's running out of petrol.
For Christ's sake.
How much you control the films done by your books?
It's been mixed. Contractually, we've just signed, for instance, the contract for the Mission Song now to make a movie. And now I have a strong position because I've been around a long time, so I can insist on approval of the director, approval of the cast, and approval of the script. But there comes a moment where the financiers are there and the film is going to be made where my word is of absolutely no further importance. And I've learned to recognize that. I like to have input at the beginning. I like it to be not contractually exercised, but as we are sitting here now, talking and enjoying one another and shooting ideas around. And then I've learned to get out, just cut, at the moment where the movie has a green light and it's going to go forward. So, for instance, I never went to Africa for the shooting of The Constant Gardener. If actors want to talk to me about their part, then with the director's consent, they may. I'm happy to do that.
In general, you are satisfied from the films?
I think there have been great high points. There was the film of The Spy Who Came In From the Cold. There was the television series of Tinker Tailor Soldier